Okay, so this core was surely different than the first core, since this one was not only a direct follow-up from the last one, but it had a lot more focus on other characters outside of just Subaru and Emilia, since a lot of the development of his and hers was mainly covered in Season 2. Also, like Season 2, the second half of this allows other characters to grow, especially since we won't be seeing a lot of the other characters from like Cruz's camp, Anastasia, well, no, not Anastasia's camp, Priscilla's camp, and Feld's camp for quite a while. So once we leave Priscilla, of course. Now, to make this review of this core a little easy, we will be going section by section, covering the major things of each specific battle per se, since there was a lot more battling here, but there was an underlying tone here for each fight, since each one kind of gave an interesting aspect of things. The first obvious section is the battle against Greed, with the main contenders against him were Reinhard von Astrea, Natsuki Subaru, and Emilia. These three each serve to show the twistfulness of Greed's view of the world and how he uses his broken abilities in such a detestable way compared to, say, Subaru with Return by Death or Reinhard with his broken-ass Divine Protections. There's also the Emilia aspect of how marriage is viewed, with Emilia being that it's between two people that do love each other, with the example of, for her being Fortuna and Betelgeuse, although they weren't married technically, they did love each other, so that's the best example to go off of. All the while Regulus Corneas was viewing marriage in a more selfish aspect, more of how he wants things to go his way and only his way is what matters, or otherwise you would be violating his human rights according to him, and then you'd be probably killed. With the concepts of power and love in mind for this section, we also need to address the wives, with Sylphie being the focus on just how much damage Regulus had done to these women, and how he's the complete opposite on how, say, Subaru would handle things in terms of loving someone like Emilia, since Regulus was wanting to marry Emilia, and obviously Subaru loves Emilia, so a great contrast between the two. But outside of that, the second they learned, like the wives learned, that Regulus's heart is within one of them, and if that holder dies, the heart would just jump to someone else, they were pretty quick to want to game end themselves. With all of this together, it makes the best sense to have Reinhard, Emilia, and Subaru face off against Regulus and free his wives without them losing their lives in the process. Subaru was the key to solving on how Regulus's authority works. Reinhard was needed on this because he's probably the only one that could realistically take on Regulus without being permadead. And then Emilia was probably the one that could reach out to Sylphie and the other wives. Each one played their roles in defeating the strongest Sin Archbishop. I'll go more into this in the big Season 3 review, but this section on its own was a 9 out of 10. There were a few cuts that would have been perfect, such as Regulus managing to blow away Reinhard's leg, more of Subaru parkouring, and even some more Looney Tune moments with Regulus. But what we were given is still amazing, since Regulus was still a threat without trying, since one hit would literally end Emilia or Subaru. And as for Reinhard, he wouldn't even be able to beat Regulus on his own, which brings back to the point of being the strongest isn't just enough to win. Here's where we get to some fun stuff, the meaning of expression of love, or love itself. Having Liliana, a bard that wants to spread all sorts of emotions through her music, teaming up with Priscilla, someone who, for the most part, was hated by the fan base due to how she was portrayed in Season 1, but does contain ideas or how an approach to love as in her own unique way. Both of these facing off against Sirius, a crazy love-struck woman that wants to spread love in a very twisted way. Makes sense. Now, for this fight, we had a condition that needed to be accomplished first. before they can actually beat her. And that was free the people before Wrath is defeated due to her authority. And seeing how Liliana had easily came under the influence of Wrath the second they conversed, made it clear that they needed to be very careful. More specifically Liliana than Priscilla, because it seemed like Priscilla wasn't affected. Now, something I liked about this section is Liliana at first being kind with Sirius, probably due to the influence of the Wrath Authority, but when discussing on the whole spreading love thing, Liliana is disgusted by how Sirius is doing it, and even caused Sirius to try and kill her, which Priscilla noted as the songstress getting under Wrath's skin. As for the fight itself, this probably goes to all the fights, but in terms of animation, it's amazing. But in terms of the fight itself, it's definitely one of the more closest ones, since Priscilla had two things in her advantage: her sword and her jewelry. Her jewelry, given by her 8 husbands, were kind of like a defense mechanism of sorts. Like, they provided protection, so should she take damage, that damage goes directly to the jewelry, which allowed her to continue to fight longer without taking actual damage. It's kind of similar to Greed's ability, only that it's way more limited, and I doubt that it would be able to take something like one of its attacks. Now, as for the sword she wields, this was probably one of the biggest helps in defeating Sirius, since she was able to land a hell of a blow without harming the little girl that was the hostage, since she brought out when Liliana succeeded in her portion of the plan, which is funny since this girl was the only reason Emilia didn't finish off Sirius in Cour 1, or more likely that she was caught off guard, since at that moment she had no real way to counter the hostage issue without, well, harming the hostage, as well as the fact that she was caught off guard. But for this section, it'll get a 10 out of 10. I think everything was amazing. Yes, even the backstory of Liliana, some hints of Priscilla's backstory with how Sirius managed to make her mad by saying certain like titles of stories that are for sure tied with Priscilla, with or without knowing at first. Well, probably she knew after Priscilla lost her cool. And obviously the music and animation are godly. For this section, I need to make a note that Wilhelm and Garfield were tasked with defeating Lust, yet they were put in a position to face off against Theresia and Kurgan. We will get to Theresia's section in a bit, but for Kurgan, the thing I will say is that it was a spectacle. Garfield's biggest trial to reach the path to being the strongest shield rests here. He failed against Elsa, since if it wasn't for the brief distraction from Melee, Elsa would have won. So having the test be against a legend and taking everything he has in him to beat Kurgan is impressive on its own. I don't have much to say here since I am working on a Garfield Tinzo video that will for sure go over more on his character and this regards of growth from this fight, as well as on the season 3 review. But the best way I can put it for now is that this was over his self-doubts were indeed in display, and when the final battle between the two happened, it was impressive to see the animation of just Garfield's determination and Kurgan's final word for Garfield, showing that he's impressed. And a legend like him being impressed with Garfield, someone very young, and being acknowledged as a warrior, says a lot. Now, say what you will that this wasn't Kurgan at his prime, Garfield still proved himself a worthy warrior. So, because of that, 11 out of 10. Now for this section. My god, this is going to be tough. I think the anime did fine. Yeah, I know, light novel readers, there were a lot of cut content and that they didn't win too much on the whole death god stuff, but here's the thing. Does it really matter for current time? Also, I'd like to bring up for those toxic light novel readers, keep in mind, Season 1 did a shit ton of cuts. For, I believe it was volumes 4 and 5, and maybe 6. You can get mad here of so many cuts, but season 1 did Aldebaran dirty, did Priscilla dirty because there was a little more with her. It cut a bunch of other stuff. I shouldn't get into it, but it doesn't matter for current time. By what I mean by this is that Theresia is an interesting character, having been given the divine protection of the Sword Saint, which screwed over her brother's dream of being the next Sword Saint, and being placed in a war would do a lot for one that didn't really wanted this. However, this information is something that isn't going to affect the main story, since it was during a time that had nothing to do with, say, Subaru, Reinhard, current Wilhelm to a degree, Emilia, Ram, and so on and so forth. Yeah, the demi-human war is important since it connects with Old Man Rom, that old guy from Rayman Ram's village, Wilhelm and Theresia, but consider that the information could be done as an OVA, go more in depth in stuff like the Demi-Human War, that generation of the Astrea family, and other characters like Carol and Grimm. It's fine with the cuts they did. I wanted to say that before saying that it's still sad what we got. Wilhelm not at his prime, facing against Theresia with only the divine protection of the Death God. They are both more or less on equal terms, and if it wasn't for Heinkel being there, it's more likely than not that Wilhelm would have won his fight. The fact that he didn't pushed Heinkel in a bad position, since he already had the guilt of losing his mother in something that he should have done, which already took a lot of hate from his father, as well as him trying to protect his son, which caused a whole other shenanigans for the Astrea family. And then losing his wife to the coma that she's in. Dude hasn't had a break, and I doubt he even wants to fight his mother right now. Like, he is not in the right state of mind. So yeah, Theresia knocks the sword out of his hand, like, easily, and prepares to kill him, only for Reinhard to come in and be put in a position that someone has to stop her. Now, there's a lot of themes of family here, of reconnection and detaching, since this fight broke the Astrea family. With Reinhard putting himself in a position to stop Theresia, which, by the way, she was aiming to kill them all, so I don't blame him here. I understand Wilhelm doesn't want to see Theresia get killed or hurt, especially against Reinhard, but, I mean, Wilhelm, dude, she was only able to regain the sense of self after being defeated, and she was aiming to kill Reinhard, so I don't blame the dude. But, obviously, with her regaining her sense of self and having a moment with Wilhelm, it doesn't help Reinhard's case, unfortunately, but that's a different point. But seeing how this one moment destroyed the Astrea family in a way that it is so unrepairable, or it's unrepairable, because of all that, it is damn 9.9 out of 10. What can I say other than the fan base has fallen in love with this chick, which unironically, this is what her goal was anyway. If there's something I can confirm that she got the budget for this season, being cruel, taking damage, changing into other forms, other people, it's insane. Now, for the fight or section itself, she was clearly messing with anyone that's dealing with her. Using Krush against Felix, using Priscilla against Aldebaran. That and the fact that she's just letting herself take damage since she won't die is pretty much telling you that she doesn't view any of her opponents as a threat. And that could actually be, could kill her. Though, when it comes down to the concept of love, that's different. For this video, I'll just say this. Capella seems like she wants to be loved, but it is so twisted since it deals more with the more physical stuff than the more deeper stuff like personality. Though any moment with her just is an instant 100 out of 10. Like, the animation just and the voice actor, they all sell it. Like, she is a crazy bitch, but her scenes are just fun. Okay, let's keep this in mind. There's 3 different gluttonies now. So let's go off with the first one. And it's with the one character that had a true win. Because out of all the Sin Archbishops, Roy Alphard not only stole the name and memories of poor Joshua that the whole community also forgot about, but he stole Julius's name and completely fucked up Ricardo. Compared to even Capella, who didn't really kill anyone outside of leaving permanent scars to innocent bystanders, Krush and Subaru, to name a few, Roy did something big. He fucked up Julius in a way that destroyed him, since being forgotten for a knight like him would destroy like his entire world. And not to mention the way he goaded Julius with using Joshua's memories and sort of twisted attitude just gives this an instant 100 out of 10. Now, the fight itself was just pure amazing because of the way it was done, and it shows that one of the gluttonies isn't to be underestimated, because Roy unfortunately gets placed under his siblings due to the fact that his siblings get a lot more screen time compared to him, as well as the fact that they're a little more memorable than him, since I did recall before, like when I was reading, like Roy, he could be a bit of a downgrade to Lye, but this section, this whole thing, reminded me that, yeah, despite that, Roy is pretty much a big fucking threat. Now, for the final battle section, per se, honestly, this one had a lot more stakes, since there were a lot more mid-tier fighters facing the threat that was the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Lye Batenkaitos. It made Otto even more badass, considering we had Otto versus Garfield last season, and now we had Otto versus Lye Batenkaitos. And one of the Three Stooges actually got a lot more credence in this. It kind of showed that they shouldn't be underestimated, despite the fact that they aren't like super high tier characters. And also Dynas and his people, like it showed that they're capable, considering they held out for a good while long, up until Lye decided to start trying. But also having Beatrice come in and join the fight and watching her fight in general is a treat. And the way how Lye got under the skins of both Beatrice and Otto by just acting like Rem, my golly, that was such a great taunt, since it made the two realize that this is an opponent that Subaru should absolutely never face, since he would be hurt in such a way that can't be fixed. Now, having him do everything he can to get Otto's name, and the whole how Felt isn't her real name and the effects that caused Lye are interesting, since it's more on the Gluttony Authority and the requirements in order to screw over the one Gluttony is trying to eat. And then Rui Arneb, or how like the fan base that I kind of knew her as Louis Arneb. Although a brief appearance from such a legendary character from both the web novel and light novel, it's just amazing watching her be a menace, and how her taunting is completely different to the way Lye taunted them. And I also like the way she used Solar Eclipse, and how she was like a completely different person who had like super crazy skills, and how she caused a lot of damage within her own right. And I don't know, this is just another 10 out of 10 section, mainly because I like how the fighting was more of a coordination between these few like the mid to low tier fighters, and how the two gluttonies can honestly wreck the shit out of everyone when they really actually try. The aftermath had a lot of sort of conclusions to things. Keep in mind that there were some cuts that were done here, so Arc 5 is sort of done, but also sort of not, since there is one big reveal that needs to happen before we can say we've concluded Arc 5 for the anime. But that being said, the main points I'm going to cover are things I covered literally in the last episode review. And that was Subaru and Amelia checking on Garfield and Otto, conversation with Sirius, and then that godly cliffhanger that they decided to go with for this season. For the checkups, it's mainly getting info of Gluttony, as well as friends checking in with each other, as well as Subaru thanking Reinhardt. You know, very wholesome things. The conversation with Sirius was pretty eerie, since the point was getting information from other Sin Archbishops, which provided an important point, the Gospels of theirs. They each came to Porcella on their own accord without letting the other know, really. And since they each had their own reasons to be there, it kind of just makes it a bit interesting that the Gospels wanted all of them there. So I'm a little suspicious on these said Gospels. And then lastly, Julius losing his name is quite a bold way to end this season, kind of mirroring season 1 director's cut of losing of the whole Rem, who is Rem ending. It's something I like because the fun part had passed off. Like all of the, what people like to now call it, the shonen arc, which is not that. There's more in depth than just shonen arc. But all of the fun stuff with other characters has kind of just moved on, and we're kind of going back to the more darker stuff again. Not that the lighter stuff is not bad. It's just Subaru kind of now has to deal with gluttony, because another one of his close allies has been affected by gluttony, so there needs to be something done about gluttony now. But 8 out of 10, only because a few things were oddly shifted, because Beatrice was supposed to be with Emilia when they kind of revealed the whole Julius's name thing, as well as her being, like, I don't know, they kind of did a few weird shifts. Not that it was terrible per se, it's just I felt a bit weird without her there. But other than that, I mean, either way, this was still a good section. Wasn't too bad. To conclude on this arc, I honestly have a lot more to say for a whole season, since this is still continuation of the stuff that was happening in the first Cour. I like more or less the direction the series is going, because arc 5 is more or less of one of Subaru's greatest moments with the speech, his ability to survive greed within one loop, not even having to loop back. Reinhardt's moments of showing, like, yeah, he's the most powerful character, but the fact that he needed Subaru in order to truly beat Regulus kind of shows a lot more of Subaru's importance, as well as giving a chance to show other characters. I know a lot of, I've seen a few discussions here and there in regards to it being bloated, and I feel like, no, this season's point is to give other characters to shine, just like how season 2 allowed Garfield to shine, allowed Emilia to genuinely find her path to shine, gave us more Otto moments, Ram moments, and like stuff like that. It's just this season had a bigger scale of more characters with more story arcs, such as the Astrea family, the stuff with Lust now, and the whole dragon blood being a problem, and also the bugs that unfortunately the civilians got turned into, and that one dragon, as well as other things of gluttony. So it still connects to the important stuff, since Subaru was affected by the dragon blood, so it connects to the issues there. His friend Julius is now, well, doesn't exist in the world, although he has his memory. So we get to see now 3 versions of how gluttony can affect you. You either lose your memories, which you end up like Cruz, you lose your name, which you end up like Julius, or you're comatose, which is losing both, which, I mean, poor Rem suffered that fate. So there is a lot that this season kind of gave us for this Cour, more of the conclusion side of things, as well as amazing spectacles, and more stuff to come, because stuff like Garfield's path to being the strongest. He now beat Kurgan, although not at his 100% prime, but he definitely beat him and earned the respect of a legendary warrior, means that Garfield's on the right track to being the strongest shield he can be for Emilia's sake and for his captain's sake. We have Beatrice doing more stuff without Subaru, which is interesting. We have Otto's capabilities on his own as a merchant, how he kind of was able to handle stuff, and I mean, he blew up Lye Batenkaitos. It may have not worked, but it was definitely a clever idea of trying to knock him out. But like I said, it's a lot of plot points coming on, but it doesn't feel like there's so many of them that it's all over the place. It's just there's some that needed time to shine, like Liliana stuff, since we're probably not going to see it for a good while, and there's stuff that we had to get some sort of closure, like Wilhelm and Theresia stuff, which now brings a whole new issue, which is now the Astreas are kind of broken. But overall, I love this season. I genuinely think it's a 10 out of 10 still. Like, this Cour, if we're going by itself, 9 out of 10. But I'll get to the season review. But overall, I enjoyed the Cour. I felt like it definitely had a lot of fun stuff to offer.